Hello, my name is Robin Mitchell, and today Electropages is here in Nuremberg at Embedded World 2024, and we are at the ASUS IoT stand, and I'm joined by our guest from a previous podcast, Silvia. So please give her a good old welcome, and thank you for having us today here.
Thank you for having us.
So just to recap for our audience, could you explain who you are and what you do at this ASUS IoT?
Sure. So I'm the Business Development Director at the ASUS IoT for EMEA. And what I do is essentially two things. So one, I look for new opportunities, usually opportunities that are longer term projects that require some kind of integration with hardware and software. And also I run the partners program that currently has over 100 partners of different kinds. And we try to put solutions together so we can offer end-to-end solutions to the market.
And so instead of just offering products, you want to get involved with your customer projects and try and make the most of what's going on there, essentially.
Exactly. So we want to get involved early on with the software vendors so that we are part of their design in and we understand specifically what they need and make our hardware almost customized to what they need.
Yeah.
But apart from that, we also want to be part of the go-to-market. So we want to be part of the distribution or part of the system integrators who are eventually the ones that are interacting with the end user.
Fantastic. Now, of course, we've got some pretty interesting stuff over here, so I'm going to move out of the way in a second. So what I'd like you to do is just go through what's going on here.
Yeah, so this is the Edge AI computers family, right? We have more than these, but we're just showing the newer ones. So on the left-hand side, we have the P3000G, which is very special because it was one of the first MXN GPU computers that has the Intel Arc actually inside. So instead of, it's one of the first actually that featured the Intel Arc. And of course, it supports Intel's OpenVINO, and we were the first ones to produce this in the market. Then we have, one thing to add is that it has two heat sinks, one for the GPU and the other one for the CPU. So that makes it quite special.
Blimey, that is a big heat sink. That's consuming quite a lot of power. So obviously, where would you see this kind of, what application would you see this in?
Right, so as we're seeing on the screen, usually people will be using this for smart city applications such as traffic management. They will be sitting inside a box on the street somewhere in order to do this kind of vehicle classification counting, people counting, and probably combining this in order to make more data-driven decisions for traffic lights or integrate it with security, etc.
And so with this kind of power, I take it, we're not talking about basic people counting, we're talking people counting from video streams. So this is where AI comes into the picture.
Exactly. So the need for the GPU is really the video analysis, right, that we're seeing on the screen. So I think this is one of the classic uses, right? And I think the one that uses more compute. So for us, the space of Edge AI compute has always been traditionally for surveillance, but then extending out into all the other smart city applications.
Fantastic. So what's this next machine over here then?
Yeah, so this is one of our newer computers, the P5101, and this one also features, it's Intel based, but it also features GPU. And again, the form factor is quite compact, as you can see, for the type of application that it does, right? So it's usually, you can see it in like small, more confined boxes on the street as well, doing similar applications as the previous one.
And I'd just like to point out here that this one supports up to 200 watt graphics cards. Now, of course, you're not going to put normal graphics cards in, you put ones with, one specifically targeted at AI. So that's 200 watts of AI potential processing. So that's a lot of juice in a small box. Now, in the podcast, we talked about the application with the car parking and the management of the business center. Do you remember that podcast we did? Yep. So of these machines, which one would you use in that situation, do you reckon?
Yeah, so it really depends on the infrastructure itself. So, for example, if we have a space that is an office, almost like a small building, we would be able to connect more cameras on a bigger device, right? But if we need to be on the street out there, we are thinking of highway or street situations, then you would pick something more compact, because then you can't have, usually you'll have the connectivity on a kind of, on a box that is on the side of the street.
Now, I think I'd like to just point something out here. Even though the machine looks quite wide, I think we need to appreciate that it's actually that part that's the computer, because you see these modules here. So I take it these are the parts that actually are going inside here. And the rest of this is just for essentially maintaining those small modules. So could you go a bit through more into what's going on here then?
Yeah, so these are MXN modules, GPU modules, and we're showing these two because these are the Intel Arc series. And they started really as a consumer type of product that Intel was supporting, but because of the demand in AI and because of all these use cases with computer vision, they started supporting it for embedded. And that's how, at the very beginning, we were the first ones to launch this product with the MXM Intel GPU. And because of the demand, Intel started sort of ruggedizing or extending the support to the Intel Arc.
Ruggedizing, I think that's a really important point, because these type of systems, because it's embedded, I imagine there might be in like automotive applications, and you can't use an NVIDIA GPU in a car if it's not automotive grade. And so I take it here, you're trying to focus on those kind of markets by making that board survive in those kind of environments.
Yes, exactly. When we're talking about harsh environments like with vibration or where the heat can go to up to more than 40 degrees, you want something that is more like this, right? More ruggedized.
So we've got another machine on the side here. So could you go through about what this one's doing?
Yeah, so this one is one of our bigger types, but there's a whole series of these. So this one is the P8000G, but we have this similar kind of design starts from the P5000 and up. And these, they of course house several GPUs, and they are more also for on street if we have a bigger dimension type of box. But the good thing is that we can connect a lot of more devices to it and more cameras to it.
And I've also noticed that you've got a very large, what looks like a PCIe sort of bay here, so you can add more hardware as needed. And does that also allow for additional GPU expanding as well?
Exactly. Yes.
And so a platform like this, you could add more of these module cards on a PCIe slot, so then you can do more AI processing as needed. So let's suppose for a second that we used one of these modules in every single slot. What kind of application do you think that could power?
Usually, if there's a need for such a big such big compute, we're thinking something more related to airports, where we're doing more complex kind of AI analysis. So not just counting, but more of a facial recognition for law enforcement type of application, border control, exactly. Yeah, behavior, combined behavior applications.
So I've noticed that the common denominator here is that you've got these really powerful GPU modules that are used for running AI. My question would be, can they also be used for training?
Typically, training doesn't happen at the edge. Yeah, so I would say it's more for inference.
Right.
But however, the fine-tuning for projects and it does happen at the edge, and that's why sometimes we need this compute, not just for the analysis itself, but to constantly update the model.
Absolutely, because I think one potential application I could personally see is a kind of local fine-tuning. So let's say you've got like a traffic junction, for example, and you run an AI on that. If it's taking all the data in and it can see that cars may come from one specific junction, it might say, okay, I'm going to let this junction probably go a bit more often than the others because that will help traffic flow. But I suppose where the power of this is when you have 1,000 of them across a whole city working together to try and sort of decide amongst each other how they should be allowing traffic. So I think my next question then comes down to, what's the most exciting project you've worked on with your customers? Because as you said before, you don't just sell the hardware, you also work with the customers. So what's the most exciting project you've worked on?
So we have a couple, and all related to smart city and infrastructure. Yeah. So we have in some countries we're seeing a lot of demand in parking. I guess because parking is the most immediate in terms of results.
I would say the most infuriating, actually, if you can't find a spot to park.
So if there's a good solution for it, customers users are happy. The government is happy because they are generating revenue as well. So it's a win-win. We're seeing a lot of demand in that, and a lot of the automating license plate recognition, access control, and monitoring the spaces. So we see a lot of that. I think traffic is one of the others that we see a lot of demand in. And we've also been seeing a couple of projects for port areas where we're monitoring containers and trying to optimize the flow. Yeah.
So, because that's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and you can't have a situation where you've got crates that are being inefficiently loaded or stored or should need to be you need to get them out. So I can imagine that something like this would be absolutely beneficial. So I think going towards the next 10 years, what do you see being the next big application for products like these?
Yeah, I think that as we see, well, in the past year, we've seen so many new solutions coming out with AI, right? I think that AI will be ubiquitous. I think that it's not just for I think the embedded world actually is one of the biggest consumer of AI hardware. And I think that, but the fact that all of the infrastructure will be connected, we will see a lot of growth in demand, but also a lot of automation. So I think probably the solutions themselves won't change much in terms of what we're doing with the recognition, but the scale of it will be much bigger.
A bit more of an off-topic question about this. I'm kind of thinking about the modules here, the size of the car.
Yeah.
Because they're so small, these cars. Do you think it could be possible that something like this might find its way into the home when it comes to smart homes in general, controlling environmental controls, AC, heating, energy usage? Do you think that could be potentially used in the domestic environment?
Actually, yes, and especially when we're talking about buildings, apartment buildings.
The larger scale ones.
We can definitely see this as a solution that is relatively small for that scale and can do a lot of things, right? For individual homes, we probably can use a smaller device, but if you think of the fact that a home will have security cameras and they want to automate access and you want to make sure who the person is at the door and those kind of things, I think will need higher compute. But I can totally see that in residential areas and buildings, apartment buildings, that will be something.
Because personally, what I could see happening in the next sort of 10, 20 years is like, you have all these large language models, like ChatGPT and stuff. And I think people might want to have their own version at home where they can kind of privatize all their data. So if you have something like this, it can infer that at home and it provides you with remote access to your files. So I do foresee the cloud becoming less important and people bringing it to the home. So the home is their cloud. And when they go away from home, they can then access it remotely. So, you could have a ChatGPT that's personalized to your writing style. You might have server files you host at home, your own website, that kind of thing. And I could see something like this being quite useful to have, because, like you say, with IoT and cameras, for example, you can have it recognize the family members, but that detail, that information is local, so it's not stored on someone else's machine. So I can see this being in a domestic environment. And I was quite curious to see what you thought. Now, just before we wrap up this interview, I've got one more question for you. For the viewers of this video, if they want to get involved with ASUS IoT, what would you recommend?
Right, so first, we have presence in most of the countries in Europe. I think that for the people who are providing solutions, it would be a good idea to be part of our partners program, because that's where we build we design together with solution providers in order to go to market. We also can introduce them to the different channels that we have in order to reach these end users. So I would think, be part of our partners program, but also get in touch with the different offices and people that are around Europe.
Fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak to us today. Thank you.